All right, comparisons between Trump's America right now and 1930s Fascist Germany. People do tend to make some comparisons between Trump and Hitler in a hyperbolic way, but are there comparisons between what's going on now in the US and what happened then? It's a different century, and we're going to look at these experts who talk about it. You might have seen this video I've already done with these two experts on authoritarianism, snippets of interviews, and this one was about we need to talk about American fascism and what it's like. Is it different to the 20th century? Is it happening at all? So let me know what you think about this. But we're going to get into this interview of these two experts, Anne Applebaum and Tim Snyder. You might have heard of them, but they have studied authoritarian regimes around the world, fascism, so they know what they're talking about. Let's get into it. We're going to hear from Anne first. This is Scott Galloway interviewing them.
So I'm always reluctant to compare America to Nazi Germany because then all anybody can think about is how Nazi Germany ended. And I didn't feel like there's going to be a Holocaust here very soon. So it always creates the wrong image. It also creates an image of dictatorship that's wrong. When people think of Nazis, they think of stormtroopers and people goose-stepping through the streets, and that's what authoritarianism looks like. And of course, in the modern world, that's often not what it looks like. Democracies end nowadays usually because they are a democratic elected leader slowly takes over the institutions of the state, or
it's a thud, not a boom now, right?
Yeah, and it can take some time, and it can be very smooth, and it doesn't necessarily involve violence. And so that's the way democracies fail. If you look at Hungary, if you look at Turkey, if you look at Venezuela, if you look at what almost happened in Poland but wasn't completed, that's not there isn't mass violence or street violence of the kind we used to. So that's why I don't like the comparison. However,
she's going to talk about the similarities now, but I get what she's saying there. People do have this image of, 1930s Germany with goose stepping in the streets. We've got these stormtroopers, the Gestapo, and people are calling ICE the Gestapo. I've heard that now. Tim Waltz actually said that in the last 24 hours, or he's on video saying that. People are saying that with, ICE turning up and putting people into vans, their masks. And so there are these similarities there, but with Trump, she said there's not violence, and we all know how Nazi Germany ended with this horrible Holocaust, and we hope that never happens again. But as Anne said, there are different authoritarian regimes around. She talks about Hungary. She talks about Poland, which came back from the brink just recently, and there are other regimes around the world. There's Iran. There's many authoritarian regimes that are different. So when we have this image in our head of what Germany was like, it's different. But there are similarities as well. And she's going to talk about, let's see what she says.
Having said that, you are right that there are multiple instances of company heads, business people, in Nazi Germany, in other autocracies, thinking that they can do a deal or they can benefit from the system.
They were just talking about the major tech companies bending the knee to Trump. They didn't really do that the last time around 2016. This time they are. They're really doing what he says, and they think they can get sort of good deals out of it, so people can get very rich. The companies can do well by bending the knee and doing what Trump says. And there are other places around the world doing the same thing, sucking up to him. And so what happened in Germany when similar happened there?
That they won't eventually suffer. And there are also multiple instances of them ultimately suffering. I mean, of course, the German economy, the stock market went up and up and up, I think until Stalingrad or at some turning point of the war. And then it collapsed, never to recover. And many businesses were destroyed and people's lives were ruined. I mean, that's an extreme example. But even if you look at Hungary, lots of business people who thought at first, Orban was talking, talking the talk of free markets and he was somebody who was going to be friendly to them. I mean, they too slowly lost control of their companies as the Hungarian state played a bigger and bigger role, somewhat like Trump wants to do, in deciding essentially who got rich and who didn't.
So doing deals, deciding who got rich, doing favors, this gift-giving culture as well. And we're seeing this with other countries. Trump trying to do these trade deals, going to him for favors for him personally, personal enrichment, which is different to the 20th century fascists. They weren't so interested in personal enrichment, really, although there was a lot of theft from Jewish businesses and so forth, but they were really more about the power and really taking over the world. Trump is enriching himself and his family. He wants to do that. So it's a different kind of autocracy heading into here. But as she said, there are comparisons with that, and business leaders thinking that they can get a good deal. But as time goes on, things actually go downhill. Ultimately, it doesn't work out of all of these regimes that she and Timothy Snyder have studied over time.
If I'm being an alarmist or paranoid, it doesn't mean I'm wrong. And I want you to tell me if I'm wrong. But I look at 1920s Germany, thriving gay community, appreciation for academics, the arts, a progressive culture, welcomed immigrants, an economic shock, a move towards fascism. And then something that really struck me, there was a 10-second TikTok where a guy just said, remember that Auschwitz was in Poland. And I look at what's going on here. And when you start rounding up people, it takes on a different complexion.
Okay, so he's talking about, say, in the US right now, we've got people being rounded up and deported, and people are saying in the comments of that last video, that's what people voted for, and that's true. And remember that Hitler actually got voted in. A lot of authoritarians at first get voted in, and then they try and stay there. And so now we're rounding up people in the US and sending them to CCOT, which is in El Salvador, not under US law, and they're saying that, it's got nothing to do with us. In effect, a concentration camp, and that is already happening in the US.
But I would argue we're one economic shock away in the US from accelerating what I would term as rounding up people for the wrong tattoo and shipping them off to another country, such that we don't have to hold to the same standards of due process or humanity. One, am I being an alarmist believing that we're actually not as far as people would like to think from a really, really ugly situation? And does this have echoes of different situations? Do you see another nation at this point in history and where, that helps kind of draw or fill in the blanks around where this is going?
Mm-hmm. Let me zoom way back out and then let me zoom in.
Okay, so this is Tim Snyder, who wrote the book On Tyranny and other books too. I highly recommend that book. I put it in that last video.
The comparison to Germany in the first third of the 20th century can be very helpful in the following way. The 20th century, as your question already suggests, could have been Germany's century. There was an awful lot working in their favor. There was a very rich and heterogeneous civil society. There were the best scientists and engineers, probably.
Remember that Einstein was there and left Germany, ended up in the US. So Germany lost people like that had to leave, were forced to leave.
The world active before the early 30s in Germany. There was a flawed but nevertheless plausible parliamentary system. There was an economy which, pound for pound, was overtaking everybody else's, right? So the United States was going to be a big deal in the 20th century, but there's a way in which the 20th century could have belonged to Germany, and they did the one thing, in my view, the one thing which could have prevented that, which was have someone who was the most extreme version of an extreme party come to power with the connivance of business elites and with the misunderstanding or willful misunderstanding of conservatives that somehow he could be controlled. Right? That was the one thing, and they did it. And so when you look at the US in the 21st century, one way to look at this is the 21st century probably should belong to the US. There are all sorts of positive things. There's the technology, the civil society, the universities, et cetera, et cetera. But there is one thing we can do to prevent that from happening, and we seem to be doing that one thing.
And it's a question of you don't know what you've got till it's gone. Is that the problem in the US right now, when people maybe got complacent and started looking at things that weren't necessarily wrong? An amazing society with these great educational institutions and media institutions as well. I mean, the authoritarians attack the courts, attack the media, attack universities, and dismantle democracy. So that's what's happening. As he said, the one thing that the US could do wrong. It is doing. What do you think about this? Let me know in the comments if you agree with this.
Now let me zoom in. So the big thing about Auschwitz in Poland, it's important. I have to contest that formulation because there wasn't a Poland at the time. By the time that Auschwitz was established on the territory of what had been a Polish army base at Oświęcim, Poland had been destroyed. But this helps to make the point just in a slightly more subtle way, which is important. The killing of Jews in Germany didn't happen in Germany. It happened in zones which the Germans decided were stateless, in zones where the law didn't apply. And so that could be a concentration camp. The definition of a concentration camp is a lawless zone. But it could also be a broad swath of territory to the east where the Germans said, we've destroyed the state, whether it's Poland or the Soviet Union, we've destroyed the state, and so the rules don't apply.
So creating these lawless zones, as C called that in El Salvador, people have called it a concentration camp. It kind of meets that definition. It is away from US soil, out of sight from the people. We just don't know what's going on there. It's meant to be a maximum security prison. It's said that people go in, but they don't come out. I mean, is this similar to a concentration camp? I say yes. What do you think about this? And they're sending people there without due process. The courts are having trouble catching up and getting people back, even when they're sent there without the due process that is meant to be under the Constitution.
That, for me, is the dangerous thing, right? Not exactly another country, although that's important, but the idea of statelessness, the notion that what we're going to do is we're going to decide that certain people are beyond the protection of the state in general. Once you do that, then it becomes much easier to ship them away and it becomes much easier to kill them.
It's chilling. Is the U.S. that much less likely to get to that very dark place in 4 years than Germany was in 1935?
Okay, so we had Trump 1.0, then we had a break from that, and now Trump 2.0 seems entirely different, and he seems to be going for broke in terms of having an authoritarian plan. This is what I think, my opinion, that they are installing Project 2025 is part of that plan for sure, but he seems to be doing many things, including Stephen Miller, which I made a video about here, wanting to suspend habeas corpus. So they want to stop due process and just be able to arrest and deport or imprison anybody they want, including US citizens.
So again, the only reason I hesitate with the Germany comparison, as I say, is because of how it ended and because we know the end of the story. But you are right that if you look at Germany in 1933, which was the beginning of the story, you can find some parallels. And you're also right that one of the important comparisons to make is the speed with which a country can transform itself. We all have this image in our head of the United States as being on some kind of even keel. Everything has been the same for so long and it will go on being the same. But countries do experience rapid declines. They do experience rapid change. And we had it once before in our history during the Civil War. I mean, our country plunged into violence and thousands of people killed thousands of other people. I mean, I don't foresee that happening now. But you can have moments of profound change. And you are right that people who are too complacent and who believe it could never happen here because of our history, because of who we are, because we're exceptional, whatever story they're telling themselves, are missing the frequency with which this can happen. So I agree. You're also right that what happened in the early 30s is a pattern that you see in other places. So again, it's a leader who is legitimately elected or chosen, as Hitler was initially.
She also said it can happen really fast. In Germany, it happened pretty fast. Do you think, I'd like to hear in the comments, do you think that people are too complacent and they just don't believe that it can happen in the US, even it is happening? When will people realize that it's happening? Will it be too late? Is it too late now? I've seen people in that previous video suggest that it's already too late. In that video, they talked about having broad coalitions, maybe of people that you don't necessarily want to have a coalition with, but it's necessary. And I'm interested in hearing from people who supported Trump, who voted for Trump, and maybe thinking, hold on, this is not what I signed up for, or what I did sign up for. Do you want this?
Then deciding to take over the institutions of the state. In other words, take over the civil service, politicize that, take over the judges, politicize them, attack the media. Actually, Hitler had this phrase Lügenpresse, which means lying press, which is something like fake news. The same institutions that he was attacking, and these are, of course, also the institutions that Orban attacked or that Chavez in Venezuela attacked. By the way, this doesn't have to be a right-wing leader who does it. You can also have left-wing version as well. All these moments when you see a rapid period of decline, it's the same institutions being attacked and undermined, and that is happening here. And in that sense, your comparison is correct.
I think that's really instructive there, something to look for of what's happening now. She mentioned about Hitler having the lying press, Trump talking about fake news all the time, attacking the media. Elon Musk talks about it as well. He just did a video on the other channel where he was talking about that again, the legacy media, or the institutions, the media that they don't like, attacking that, attacking the universities, trying to control the universities, what they do, withholding funding that's going on, attacking the courts, talking about rogue judges, Stephen Miller talking about that, Elon talking about that, Trump talking about that. And so these institutions they're attacking, and she says that that's I was going to say a normal thing, but a normal thing for authoritarians to start doing, and it's a slippery slope. Do you see that could be happening here? Let me know what you think in the comments. I'd really like to know. And right now, if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm going to put a related video right there. I'm going to put that previous video, if you haven't seen that, I'll put it in the pinned comment and the description as well, if you haven't seen that yet. And thanks for watching this one, and I'll see you in the next one.